Putin keeps threatening the world, keeps bluffing, saying, well, if that will happen, we will nuke Ukraine or we will start third world war. This is something that has been there like since the day one, when they have been threatening the West. And we again are calling for our allies to ignore those threats, because look at them. They are unable to protect their own territory. They are threatening the world with massive conflict. It's just like impossible, and they're playing into the illusion that Russia is invincible.
Now, let me switch now here on Drive to another. I won't say the other crisis flaring around the world, because there are many of them. But the two, I guess, that are very much in focus at the moment are Lebanon and the Middle East and Ukraine, where we're going to discuss what is going on now. Joe Biden, having pledged $7.9 billion in military aid to Ukraine, he's meeting later on the Ukrainian leader, Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, conspicuously absent from what we heard from Joe Biden earlier on was any agreement to the use of long-range missiles for use against military targets in Russia. Yesterday, at the UN, Zelensky alluded to his victory plan aimed at bringing an end to the war with Russia.
We must restore nuclear safety. Energy must stop being used as a weapon. We must ensure food security. We need to bring home all our captured soldiers and civilians. We must uphold the UN Charter and guarantee our right, Ukraine's right to territorial integrity and sovereignty, just as we do for any other nation. We need to withdraw the Russian occupiers, and we need to make it clear the war is over. This is the peace formula.
So those are the ambitions, but how? Let us now talk to Kira Rudik, who's the Ukrainian MP, leader of the Holos Party of Ukraine, now on the line from Kyiv. Hello to you, Kira.
Hello, John, and thank you so much for having me.
Always welcome, Kieran. So there is then no agreement from the US, from the American president, for missiles, including those British Storm Shadow missiles, to be used against targets in Russia. Are you deeply disappointed about that? What are your thoughts?
Well, John, since the beginning of full-scale invasion, we kind of got used to hearing the word no to many of the things that we have requested, starting from the long-range weapons, the tanks, the fighter jets, et cetera. And we know that with the right persuasion and with the persistence, you can get from no to yes. Or in our case, I think the gentle nod would work as well. So President Zelensky's trip over to the United States is not over, and we are hoping that at some point he will get the necessary permission. We also know that the time is of an essence because Russians' attacks intensified over the last days. Perhaps they have received additional weapons and supplies from their allies in Iran or North Korea. Yeah. And we are being, again, a target for all the time, day and night, and air raid sirens have been on today, like at least 5 times in Kyiv.
I know, Kira, you are very well versed in the military ins and outs, the technicalities of all of this, as well as the broader strategic politics. You say you hope for a nod, possibly, even if you don't get a formal yes. Is it possible to use these missiles without American approval? I mean, we know that they need, the use of American technology for targeting, for example.
Of course. And we know that there were some of the very successful steps taken without publicly announced that we have agreement to that. For example, the incursion into the Kursk region was one of the very successful Ukrainian operations, but they were not announced that we have received support or permission from our allies, perhaps, to go ahead on that. So I'm not waiting to see the first lines in the media saying, well, Zelensky finally got what he needs, right? Because obviously that would play to Russia's hand. But I hope that President will be able to deliver the importance of the matter, especially with the recent threats of targeting our nuclear stations. And let me be very clear, as a country that has survived Chernobyl, this is something where the world needs to draw its own red lines. When Russia is planning to target something inside or like near the nuclear station, we are basically one idiot away from really catastrophe. Yeah,
I mean, you're referring there to the idea of Russia targeting your nuclear installations, which was referred to explicitly by President Zelensky in his address to the UN yesterday. Look, Is it possible, do you believe, Kira, for Ukraine to hold the line without the use of these longer-range missiles aimed at Russian targets? We see so many reports now that in key parts of the front line, your forces are struggling to hold the line.
It is indeed very hard, and we are struggling, and we wouldn't be asking for that decision if it was not completely necessary and urgently and a matter of life or death for us. And this is why all the actions being taken, and this is why we have been working with our partners in Britain, and we are grateful for the support in Germany, in other European countries. But right now, we see that the decision needs to be made in the United States.
Yeah.
And I think we have enough arguments to prove and to show the facts on how necessary it is for us. There is another side of this, which is Putin keeps threatening the world, keeps bluffing, saying, well, if that will happen, we will nuke Ukraine or we will start third world war. This is something that has been there since the day one,
yes,
when they have been threatening the West. And we again are calling for our allies to ignore those threats, because look at them. They are unable to protect their own territory. They are threatening the world with massive conflict. It's just impossible, and they're playing into the illusion that Russia is invincible.
Yeah.
I think at this point, John, we have proved by the facts that they are not invincible. We have proved by the facts that it is possible to win this war if we have enough means to do that. And we are just saying, please, please, please give us those means.
So Kira, you say there it is possible to win this war. The president of Ukraine is talking to Joe Biden today, presenting what's being called this victory plan. What might that plan look like, Kira?
I will tell you the truth, John, is basically this plan says, please execute on all the promises that have been made. Provide us with the weapons that we are expecting without a delay. And we know what to do with them. And we will be able to push Russia back with all our capabilities. Unfortunately, it doesn't work politically the way when you are coming into the highest office and say it with exactly those words.
Yeah.
This is why President will be presenting it as a peace plan, explaining things that are very obvious. Look, this is not something new. It's not that, oh, let's wait for aliens to come up and help us. We know that our future in our hands, but we also know that we cannot win the war without the sufficient amount of weapons, the permissions to use them as we need,
yes,
and the amount of financial support that we need to survive till the point of the victory.
Yes. What I'd love to understand is what victory means from your perspective. Then you want the tools to do the job that you're doing. You want to be able to continue the fight against the Russian invader. But are you contemplating the possibility of pushing Russia out of the Crimea region, for example, and away from the Donbass? Because no one imagines that Vladimir Putin is going to surrender or concede defeat. What, in real terms, Kira, does your victory mean?
I will tell you very honestly that the victory means that Russia would not be able to attack us again. This is the key point. And as of right now, there is not a person or an organization or a way that we see that we can stop them from doing that in 3, 5, 10 years. This is why for us, it's a very complex matter. And this is why for us, this is the key matter. That, of course, we want to get all our territories back. Of course, we want to liberate our people. Of course, we want the international justice to be restored. But the key point here is of how do we make sure that our children would not have to fight this war over and over again. And I think this is the key. This is the core. And this is what needs to be discussed. Because when we are talking about the territories, it's a very important and painful subject for Ukrainians. When we are talking of making sure that soldiers who are raping and torturing and committing all kinds of the war crimes need to be accounted and our people need to receive justice, it is a painful matter. But the most important one is of what happens next. And this is why right now we need to be concentrated on getting weapons, enough weapons to survive another day, to survive through the next winter, which we will be facing 80% of our energy structure has been destroyed. And we know that it will be incredibly hard. But we are not giving up. We are not like saying, oh, let's stop here and start negotiation. We say that we have it in ourselves to fight back, and please get us the means to do that. Because I think right now we have been talking a lot about what would mean when Ukraine wins, but we are not talking enough what would happen if we lose. And this is a picture that one needs to keep in his or her mind a lot, and make the decisions based on that as well. Do you think that Russia will stop unless they are stopped?
Kira, difficult as it is for most of us to imagine what you are truly experiencing just at the moment. Again, thank you so much for talking to me this afternoon. And believe me, we wish you nothing but well.
Now, the Ukrainian President Zelensky, is set to present his victory plan to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris later on today. This follows a warning by Russian President Vladimir Putin that Moscow is changing its rules on the use of nuclear weapons, effectively lowering the threshold at which they might be deployed. So how concerned should we be about all this? And are we really likely to see a peace agreement in Ukraine anytime soon? Let's talk to Ukrainian MP Lesia Vasilenko. Lesia Vasilenko, good afternoon from us. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm well, thank you very much.
Good. Now, tell us about the significance of President Zelensky's trip to the White House today. Are you thinking that this really is a case of now or never in terms of getting a decent level of response from the White House?
Ukraine is reliant on its allies, especially on the US, for military support and for defending itself against Russian aggression and for defending the very concept of democracy against Russian aggression. But the way that America acts also influences how the UK, Europe, and the other countries who are supporting Ukraine are acting as well. So for us, of course, the victory plan is being presented today to President Biden, and the hopes in Ukraine are that there will be a general agreement to proceed on the 5 points of the victory plan and to ensure that Russia's aggression is stopped, that there are the means to do that, that ammunition arrives quickly on time, and that we also have the right to strike at the very sources from which Russia launches its attacks on Ukraine's civilians and on our people.
Just to make it very clear then, what Ukraine believes it needs is the right to defend itself by firing weapons, some of which may very well come from the US and indeed other Western associates, into Russian territory. And at the moment, you can't do that, can you?
No, at the moment, there has not been a consensus reached over that. Some countries in the anti-Putin coalition are very much willing to give Ukraine the right to do so. The US is still stalling on this matter.
Stalling because, well, why do you think the White House is stalling?
I guess there is a fear that Russia will escalate further. However, from the Ukrainians' point of view, the escalation has already happened. It happened in 2022. The very fact that the aggression was not stopped initially in its tracks back in 2014 means that Russia is always free to escalate at any point. Russia's idea is to destroy all of Ukraine and to wear out Ukraine and all of its allies with a protracted conflict, and this is exactly the game that Russia is playing, and I must say, unfortunately, rather successfully at the moment.
Yes. Okay, but they do appear to be changing their rules of engagement in terms of nuclear weapons and the use of them. And it appears to be the case that they are thinking of saying, if you, Ukraine, fire a weapon into Russia supplied by a nuclear power, then that is enough for us, Russia, to think about deploying nuclear weapons of our own. And that is a truly terrifying prospect, isn't it, for all of us?
Russia has threatened so many times with activating nuclear warfare and pressing that button, launching nuclear missiles against Ukraine and then against the whole world. It has never done so. It has never done so in this war, nor has it done so in previous wars that it has fought, although threats were fired much more often than missiles. So I think it will be the case here as well, because Russia also is a country on this planet, and Russians also live on this planet. And the aftermath, the consequences of a nuclear attack will be felt by everyone, and first and foremost by the Russian people, because Russia is located right next door to Ukraine.
So, frankly, Russia will be destroyed, and let's face it, so will the rest of us. So it's a grim prospect that most of us simply choose not to think about 99% of the time, although I must admit my thoughts are straying there right now as we discuss it. What about the fact that we know Joe Biden isn't going to be in the White House for very long? He could be replaced by his vice president, and so things might continue pretty much as they are. Or it could be Donald Trump in the White House. Now, are you very fearful about that possibility?
For us, it doesn't matter whom the American people choose as their president. Our efforts as Ukrainians are directed at building relationships with both Republicans and Democrats. We need the bipartisan support. We need the full support of the United States, and this is what we are concentrated on. We're definitely not meddling in any way in US elections, and it's up to the American people to choose whom will their president be.
But you must have watched the presidential debate, and you must have heard Donald Trump, frankly, refuse to say that he wanted Ukraine to win the war. How did you, when you were watching it, how did you react to that?
Of course, I wish that he would have had a stronger stance, and that he would be clear on who the aggressor is, and that Ukraine must win the war. At the same time, we have to. I'm not making excuses for Trump right now, but for me as a Ukrainian, this is ridiculous, and there must be a stronger stance. But at the same time, as a politician, what I can tell you is that he's also out there trying to win as many votes as possible from the American people, and his job is to show that his concern is with the national interests and internal politics of the United States. So in this regard, given that this was spoken in a debate and in an electoral process across the Atlantic, where people are far away from what is happening in Ukraine and they don't really feel the consequences, this has to also be taken into account.
Right. And I don't know, I'm not for 1 minute expecting you to have read it, but there's a very, very interesting and moving report on the Times website right now by Anthony Lloyd, the incredibly experienced war reporter. And he's with Ukrainian forces in the Donbass. And he just makes the point that that is a long, grueling, bloody campaign. And there is no talk amongst the troops he was able to have a conversation with about this so-called victory plan, about President Zelensky's trip to Washington. It's just one day of misery after another for those very brave men, we have to say. And some of them are in middle age, some of them are much younger. But it's pretty desperate, isn't it? What is the morale of the Ukrainian forces?
The Ukrainian forces are standing strong on their positions, and they are fighting back against the Russian aggressors. The same as the people who stand behind the Ukrainian forces, the people of Ukraine who are also resiliently going day by day in a rather difficult situation, because economically, socially, Ukraine has become a very complex, complicated and difficult place to live in. And this is the harsh truth of it. But it doesn't mean that people are willing to sacrifice their freedom for a quick, short-term peace, which will only lead to more wars. There's a feeling among the population of Ukraine that we want this to end, but we want this to end once and for all. And for that, we will go the long way that we have to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear you talk about what life is actually like on the ground on a day-to-day basis in Ukraine. It sounds really tough, Lesia, and I imagine all sorts of people are making decisions they never thought they'd have to make and doing things they never thought they'd have to do. That's just a fact of life in war, I guess.
That is true. Wartime life is it's not easy, to say the least. It's about losses on a daily basis, physical losses, losses of family, of loved ones, losses of health, of limbs, of economic affluence, of benefits that you could have, of opportunities that you could have. But at the same time, it's also a time of unity, a time when people come through for each other, and a time when a country forges its own values. And our value in Ukraine is the value of liberty and freedom. This is what we value most. And this is the principle that we pass on from generation to generation. And we have proven more than once that we are willing to go all the way in order to stay free and in order to have a free will to decide our own fate and our own future.
The Ukrainian MP Lesia Vasilenko, thank you very much.